pointers. And they
Okay.
said Chinese. Then I
Yes.
just put it aside because I'm trained in the Ghana law office to look at memorandums of agreement in a certain way. And automatically it just sets into my mind, and I wrote, what is this? And I wrote this.
Yeah, okay.
That's all there is to it. Now, so it doesn't even look like this.
Yeah.
This looks like they used an Apple computer. I don't think they use Apple computers.
No,
Yeah.
the point is, this was the draft released by Senator Trillanes.
But you know, I love Trillanes. He has certainly very acute judgments, like about Faldon. He said, you know, when we launched the coup, we said we're going to take over Peninsula, and Faldon showed up in the Mandarin. He said, we have little problems then. We have.
All right, so point is,
pretty
where do you
tense.
think did this come from?
I don't know.
You don't know?
No,
Okay, so this draft does not exist.
Well, it exists.
No, but there are no two
Trillanes.
drafts ever agreed upon.
No, there was never. There was just this draft, and then let me tell you, it's a really ignorant statement to say that these agreements and all the other, the rest of the 29 were not revealed to the public immediately. But to begin with, the reason I was here from ASEAN instead of going with the president to Papua New Guinea for APEC was because only 7 documents had been cleared. So I came back to Manila, and then I went over all the rest and started approving them, and then they were all included. Even Malacanang was swamped with the number of documents that I released, because one is Sonny Dominguez and I worked on this, and I trust him.
Okay.
So we just cursorily looked at it, and there's no danger to national security or anything like that. There were agreements on certain roads, a certain dam, etc. And then suddenly they were swamped with 29 documents.
Okay, all right.
They couldn't even tell. There was an exchange that said, who has them? Who has them? Isn't it at the end, of course, I had them, but remember I had sent them to Malacanang. Malacanang must send them back to me, because it's mine after they were signed.
Okay, so let's start first with some of the details of the oil and gas MOU. And then, okay, it says here that in the first part is, it starts off with recalling the charter of the UN, the 1982 UNCLOS, and the 2002 Declaration on the Conduct of Parties. Of course, this is a whole paragraph.
Yes, that's right.
Where does the arbitral tribunal victory fit in this context?
International law. It's
Okay.
under international. In fact, I made a comment in the United Nations, which sort of upset some people, that hey, the arbitral ruling is not so much against China as it was. It's not so much in favor of the Philippines as it was in favor of international law. There was confusion on this field, in this field of what are maritime features, and they clarified it. And I said, perhaps one day China too has maritime features. They will use that. It's not a question of one won, the other lost.
So,
That's
Secretary,
it. It's not part of international law.
does this mean that under the MOU, China has to respect the decision of the arbitral
Well, no,
tribunal?
they won't respect it. They said we did not take part in that agreement, and who are we to impose it on them? The point is, it is now a part of international law. Do you subscribe to it? Oh, the principal country that refuses to recognize anything under international law is the United States of America.
Okay, so in
They
other
won't
words,
sign UNCLOS.
so just so we go through this to clarify, the victory in the arbitral ruling cannot be used as a basis
Yes,
for
it can.
of the MOU.
Yes, it's here, international law.
Okay, but then what if China says, you know what, Secretary, we don't recognize that victory? Where do we go from here?
What would be the point of saying that? Remember, on the other side, there are also lawyers. Like, we're lawyers on this side. Why would you even bring that up?
Okay.
This is a cooperation agreement for exploration. Now, the notion that came out, there's only need technical assistance. No, we don't. We also need the money to explore. I have been a part of an oil exploration company, and the problem has always been for the past, I don't know how long, we don't have money. It's a number of drill sites you're able to exploit, but we just can't do it.
So what would the difference be between the MVP group now, that I think
I don't
is
know about that.
exploring
Yeah.
a certain
Well,
part
yes.
of, and for example, the need for China to be in this? Go on,
Well, I don't know.
Okay, so you're not familiar
You're
yet.
not
Okay,
familiar with that.
I'll allow you on that. Okay, so the basic principle, your second part is, it says mutual respect, fairness, mutual benefit, flexibility and pragmatism and consensus.
Yeah, remember, when I draw an agreement like this, I do it under the rules of roles. You put a veil of ignorance in front of you, you don't know who the parties are to make it fair. So, what particular contracts will be affected by this? I don't know, and I don't want to know.
Okay. Number 3, the working mechanism is the two governments will establish an intergovernmental joint steering committee. When will that be, Secretary, and who are the
Well,
members?
I give a 1 year deadline in order to start this process, but it says the parties shall endeavor within 12 months to come up with something. Endeavor is one thing, succeeding is another.
Okay.
So it will maybe 1 year. We hope 1 year.
Okay. But who will the members be, Secretary, more or less? On the committee?
The top will be the ministries of foreign affairs of the two countries, and then the ministries of energy of the two countries, and then they create working groups. Working groups referring to particular areas where they intend to explore. What those areas are, again, nobody knows. And when this was drafted, no area was in contemplation.
Okay, I'm going to read to you something so you can respond to this. So it says the difference on this part of the final MOU, yours is, it indicates both countries decided to negotiate on oil and gas. That's what you wrote. The Trillanes copy had both parties have agreed to conduct joint oil and gas exploration. I mean, it's a play of words, but there is a difference.
It's a play of words, but how can I respond to nonsense? It's not even a draft. It may have been written by Trillanes' staff. I can't respond, I'm dealing with a foreign power.
Yeah.
Well, he's dealing with his staff member.
Okay, because he says that was released through a source.
It's always released through a source.
Okay, fine.
Yeah.
Okay,
I'm a journalist.
Okay, moving forward. So section 3, and then we move now to B. Okay, it says here, can you read section B, Secretary?
The committee will be responsible for negotiating and agreeing the cooperation agreements and maritime areas to which they will apply, and deciding the number of working groups to be established and for which part of the cooperation area each working group is established. Each working group will negotiate and agree on entrepreneurial, technical, and commercial arrangements that will apply in the relevant working area.
Okay, what is the cooperation area?
We don't know. That's the whole point.
Okay.
Now,
Would it be research, exploration already?
The relevant working area refers to the area itself where they will explore.
So the area itself, offhand, where were you seeing the area? Is it in Panganiban?
No,
Which reef?
I refuse to see that.
Okay.
Because when we're trained, well, at least in Harvard, is that you try not you put a veil of ignorance in front of you, and you create a document that is acceptable to both parties, because each party may one day find themselves on the other party's side.
Okay, but the reason I'm asking this is because of the 7 reefs claimed by the Philippines in the Spratlys archipelago already. I mean, China's transformed 7 of them already as it is. Under the arbitral tribunal ruling, the Panganiban Reef, which is Mischief Reef, is within the EEZ. And the arbitral tribunal ruling was clear that everything within the EEZ is the Philippines.
Yes.
So I wanted to ask you, in terms of the cooperation area, this is where it's a bit...
Well, that is where that is something for the working groups to first agree on, and then it goes a bit higher to the ministries of energy, which they will again, and I can assure you, for as long, and I hope Kusi stays there, for as long as Kusi is there, he'll be very strict on that, and then it gets up to my level. And on the other side, Wang Yi.
Yeah.
But then certainly, as I said, we don't prejudge that. Except from our side, you will be looking at it from the arbitral ruling, and from their side, they will be looking at it from their understanding.
So for the record, when you mentioned cooperation areas, when you wrote this down, it was not referring yet to one specific area.
We don't do that.
It's still to be agreed upon.
If you did that, then I would already be negotiating for a particular area. And I don't think, one is I don't own an oil company.
But so there's none. Kumbaga, it's open. Which parts?
But it's not, it doesn't mean anything. It means that you now have a framework for conducting specific arrangements already.
Okay, all right. Next is it's specific already that China authorizes the China National Offshore Oil Corporation, or CNOOC, as the Chinese enterprise for each working group. Describe this with China already authorizing CNOOC.
Yes, that's how they deal with it. That's how they deal with oil exploration, not just here, but anywhere else in the South China Sea, with the China National Offshore Oil Corporation. In the Philippines, PNOC can act like the China National Offshore Oil Company, or it can do so through private companies that have gotten a service contract
And
under the Department of Energy.
And under this agreement, Secretary, does this mean that it's a government-to-government deal, or the government will contract CNOOC? How does that work?
No, the government does not contract in China. What China does, how they wish to conduct their business, is their business.
Okay.
How we choose to do it, in one service contract, I understand PNOC will take the lead. In other areas where service contracts are or may one day be issued, it will be those companies to whom service contracts were issued.
Okay. So, Secretary, I'm curious because I've had Senior Associate Justice Antonio Carpio many times on the show to explain this, and he said that under the Constitution, it's clear that the Philippines cannot get into a government-to-government contract with anything in the West Philippine Sea, but the foreign company has to be deemed as like a third-party contract. In other words, it's with this system, it's almost like China assigns CNOOC, we assign PNOC, and then it's equal.
Or PNOC issues service contracts to particular companies.
Yeah, like CNOOC.
No, it cannot be. CNOOC is a government agency, so is PNOC.
Okay.
So China,
Okay.
the Chinese, when I wrote this, the Chinese did not object to it.
Okay.
So it's because that's usually how they do it. And then there's PNOC. Now PNOC can do it itself. I understand there's one particular service contract, one area that will be handled by PNOC directly, and I'm not going to mention it because if I do, the stock market will go crazy. And the others, they have issued or may issue in the future service contracts. And by the way, there's something Kusi keeps telling me.
Oh.
He said, really nice, but I have a moratorium.
Yeah,
Now,
that's very
can I
true.
lift the moratorium? Don't ask me. So far, I'm not yet the president of the Philippines.
I think we should explain that to the public.
Yes.
I mean, there is a moratorium on oil and gas
You
exploration.
should ask Kusi because he knows
at
his
this
stuff.
point, yeah. So that's a very good point because yeah.
But then if I may mention, what does it mean?
Because
Does it mean we should have waited for the moratorium to be lifted before doing this? No. Can you imagine? I usually have a bad way of describing businessmen. Can you imagine the number of people knocking on my door if we did this after the moratorium was lifted? No, this is the time to do it. Again, like a veil of ignorance, I'm doing something in a vacuum and producing an equal and fair agreement,
Okay.
which is better.
When you say equal and fair agreement, are you coming from an equal and fair agreement that doesn't violate the Philippine Constitution? Because what may be equal and fair to China may violate our Constitution. I'm just curious where you're coming from.
I'm coming from the Philippine side. Now, China is not obliged to accept the Philippine side. If you wanted to do that, then, okay, let me give you the real context. There's not a single goddamn American company who wants to explore in the South China Sea. And when there was one company that had a deal with Shell, I read this, not my information, I read this in Hayden's book. Everybody should read that book.
Okay.
China told Shell, wonderful, you have a deal with the Philippine company, wonderful. Do you mind dismantling all your companies on the Chinese continent? Because the amount of oil in China is staggering. South China Sea is a joke compared to the oil inside China. And yet, because China is determined to become the greatest economy on the planet, they plan ahead. We don't. Well, we don't have China's resources. China also looks at the South China Sea for possible deals.
Okay.
Otherwise, that's it.
Okay, I'm curious. If CNOOC is the Chinese counterpart,
It is, it has
already
to be.
says,
Yeah.
in in the MOU. When you wrote this draft, I know that there's still a working group, but ideally, what would that mean? Because they will be on the exclusive economic zone of the Philippines. For example, will there be Filipinos on the ship?
That I don't know. They'll have to work that out themselves. I don't want to go into that. But I hope there are.
So you
certainly
do
in the
hope,
exploration, because that apparently is required so that any information that comes out of the exploration will be known by both parties.
Must be shared.
But there is a confidentiality requirement here that they don't start throwing it out into the stock market.
Okay, now, is there an outcome sharing that was discussed in the MOU? Because once again, I'm sorry to mention this, the draft released by Senator Trillanes included a separate outcome sharing section which specified that the outcome shall only be shared by two parties. Does that even exist?
No, it doesn't even make sense.
Okay.
Yeah, well, I don't mind, but I still love the guy.
Okay, but go on. There is no outcome
There's
sharing.
not. There's no outcome
Okay, why
sharing.
didn't you include
But there is a presidential decree that says 60-40.
Yeah.
I talked to an expert, again, I don't want to mention his name, but he has been involved in this. He discovered a huge oil reserve off Beijing.
Yeah.
The Chinese are very grateful to him. He's Filipino. And he said, well, these things, in the end will be determined by your sharing, will be determined after the costs are recovered by both sides. It will then be determined according to the market price of oil and or gas.
Okay, so wait, you think China, so there is no outcome sharing mentioned here,
None.
but with the
But
working,
certainly when we get into the working that way, when the working group gets into it, they will understand that they must operate on the Philippine side within Philippine law, 60-40.
Yeah.
On the Chinese side, they will also understand that the Philippine side needs to proceed on the basis of Philippine law.
But
Now,
you
they can
think-
either walk away from the table or agree to it.
so,
And that would not be in case some lunatics out there say, oh, then China has submitted. No, China has decided it's worth the price of investment. 60-40.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, what if China doesn't agree and wants equal?
Then you walk away. They walk away because we cannot. It's not allowed by our domestic law.
And it's quite interesting hearing this from you because it seems to me that you're very clear on your stand when it comes to, you've already found advocates with Justice Carpio and Secretary Albert Del Rosario. They've already issued statements.
I didn't know that. Yeah.
Yeah, they did.
Because I've been running around for.
Okay, former Secretary Albert Del Rosario read your MOU and said the MOU signed and drafted by Secretary Locsin is an agreement to negotiate. It is safe. Nothing has been given away. All right? And he calls for the Constitution not to be violated and says so far with this MOU, it's still safe. So the question is, he also asked that the victory in the arbitral tribunal not be undermined.
Absolutely.
Okay. Is there any way in this MOU?
I may have gone a little far.
Okay.
When I said in the United Nations, there is no power in the Philippines that can overrule international law to which we subscribe. It's in the Constitution because international law is a part of our law.
Yeah.
So that's it. It's no longer within the competence or jurisdiction of any government to change any part of international law of which the arbitral ruling is now an integral part.
Yeah.
That's
So
just it.
how would you describe yourself as, because I've interviewed also Secretary Alan Cayetano many times, and you're both different. I mean, he also wrote his own draft, and he said he did, and he says, Karen, this is a completely different draft.
You show that. Alan and I worked really closely together. His dad was my senior partner in.
So how would you describe yourself as a foreign affairs secretary? What kind are you? I mean, with Secretary Del Rosario, clearly he pivoted clearly to one side. Alan, some said, pivoted to the other side. But it seems to me that while you are willing to work with China, it seems to me, at least now, there are non-negotiables with you.
Well, of course, there's the Constitution, there's international law. I have no competence to change that. Other than that, well, as I mentioned in another interview, I said, look, if you don't want to, if there are Filipinos who hate China so much that under no conditions do they want us to work with China. Well, since the Americans are not in the least bit interested in helping us find any oil here, maybe because, yes, we have oil and gas, but it's not all that great, no? But it's enough for our purposes,
Yeah.
okay?
But how do you know that it's
Well, that's what, that's, as I said, I used to work.
okay, go ahead.
I was with an oil drilling company. But maybe there is, but it's certainly nothing compared to what's on the Asian mainland, apparently. All I'm going to say is, if you really don't want China, then our alternative is we're running out of oil and gas, out of Manampaya. Hey, it's okay. Let's go back to darkness. It's not a problem.
Okay.
Not for me, especially me. I don't like digital.
No, all right, but then, just to clarify, is you are sticking with the arguments of Justice Carpio that anything within the EEZ is exclusively
Yes.
for the Filipino use?
There was a GMA 17 that went there. So I said, well, let me say, let's find out if exclusive economic zone for economic purposes means that TV crews going there are part of fishing, part of oil exploration. What I do know is that an exclusive economic zone, you cannot exclude anyone from that under freedom of navigation. Nor can any country exclude other people. Whether or not that includes media, we'll find out.
Okay.
But I can tell you this: when you have this is my view. When you have a conflicted zone, even if we have signed this, and as I said with the Brick and Road, there are differences between China and the Philippines over maritime features. These differences may continue, they may be resolved in time, and who knows, maybe we'll forget all about it. But the point is, they're there. Is that an excuse not to deal with China and the things that are of mutual benefit to us? My view, no. So, well, let's see what happens after that.
Okay, all right. So there is no outcome sharing agreement, that's for
Not
sure.
yet, not yet.
Not yet.
But there will
Okay.
be.
Why do you think is there a distrust towards China in the latest SWS survey?
Well,
I mean, after all of this, with the government really pivoting towards China, why do you think it still exists?
but okay, here I don't speak as foreign, but I will repeat what I would say before I became foreign secretary. I would say there is a prejudice against Chinese among Filipinos, and don't provoke that, because I don't believe we shall ever be as cruel as other Southeast Asian countries have been to their Chinese populations. But let's not test it.
Okay, okay, all right. Now, just to finish this, because there is another MOU, Secretary. So it says 12 months to agree. It says here
12 months to start working.
12 months to start
working on the working groups and producing agreements towards specific areas. In other words, to get started.
But it says here, the two governments will endeavor to agree.
Endeavor to agree, yeah.
Within 12 months.
Within 12 months, we'll endeavor.
Okay, just explain endeavor in this
Endeavor
context.
means
In
at
this
least
context.
so that we're signing something naman that, means something, a way forward is we will really try to arrive at some agreement on specific areas for exploration.
Okay.
Now, endeavor could take, I hope, 12 months, or maybe 24 months.
Okay.
Maybe 36 months.
All right, just to finish it already, there are 3 points left. Number 4 is the MOU Discussions, Negotiations, and Activities of two governments will be without prejudice to the legal positions of both governments.
That's right.
So how is that? That's a good question, because if it's not prejudice to either or, China firmly believes they own the whole of the South China Sea.
No, China believes that the arbitral ruling was not done with their participation because they refused to participate.
No, and they still stick to the 9-dash line.
Well, that's fine.
Okay, so we
that's no
believe
problem.
that a certain areas already are part within the exclusive economic zone.
As already explained by the arbitral ruling, we accept that. Of course,
Yes. So how this is the question. how will this work if it's without prejudice to both?
Absolutely. Or
Okay.
they wouldn't have signed it. Now, if there was a prejudice to both, that leaves open the possibility that we give in. Why would I allow that? That will also leave the possibility that China will give in. Why should the Chinese allow that? So it's better to say without prejudice or legal positions. That stays pat.
Yeah.
Status quo.
I'm
And
curious, yeah, go on,
the
go
most
on.
important is this memorandum of understanding does not create rights or obligations under international or domestic law.
Okay, okay, specifically explain why you added that.
Well, one is under international law, as we understand it, which includes arbitral ruling. That's from our side. We will not. It will not. It does not violate it. It does. Oh, the most important thing is it does not create rights or obligations. So you don't even arise whether or not our position is accepted by China or China's position is accepted by us. And when it comes to the sharing domestic law, so far we have a
60-40 now.
60-40 PD. We didn't really change all PDs in office. The guy had some great things to do. Can I go?
Yeah.
He has
No, but-
smart people with him.
No, but so China signed this. The MOU does not create rights or obligations.
That's right.
So, but it would also mean that China can't claim new rights just because you help explore.
No.
Yeah,
So-
it's there. Okay.
Okay,
Next.
that will also guide the working groups.
Yeah.
So when they start meeting their Chinese counterpart and they start talking about a specific area, what equipment will be used, etc., how the financing will go, and if one side or the other cannot quite meet up with the 60-40 financing requirement,
Yeah.
not sharing, well, they have to work out.
Okay.
yeah, so, yeah.
Something very interesting is, of course, all information is confidential. It's
That's right.
specific there. And other matters may be referred jointly by the two governments for consultation and agreement. Okay. Now, this is not legally binding. I
Yes,
read.
that's right. Yeah.
So some may ask, Secretary Teddy, your intentions were good. You wrote it quite well, but how can we trust China if it's not legally binding? They won't follow anyone.
Well, then if they don't, then we don't have any agreements. That's it. So,
Okay, of the 29 agreements signed, I know the others are business related.
Yes, yeah.
Some feared that there was a clause in those agreements that if things didn't work out as expected, Chinese laws would prevail.
well, I'll have to ask Annie Dominguez.
Okay, but was that anywhere in
Not that I saw.
not in the negotiations whatsoever, and this as well?
Yes.
Okay.
The brick and road too. I mean.
Yes,
yeah,
okay.
yeah.
All right. So we're going to continue our conversation with Foreign Affairs Secretary Teddy Boy Locsin. We'll discuss the other MOU after this short break. I hope that clarified some of your questions over the weekend on the oil and gas development MOU. Hot copy. We'll be right back.